is up? Welcome on into Fantasy Baseball today, and I'd like to officially welcome you to Joctober. Frank Stampfl joined by Scott White today on the pod. We will be taking a closer look at the second base position year in review. Scott already has his early 2022 ranks out for second base. They are live on the site. We'll talk about those as well. But it's all about the Braves, baby. They are up 2-0 against the Dodgers in the NLCS. Joc Pederson. Shout out to Adam Azer. I know used to have a nice little soundbite there for him. Joc has 3 homers in the postseason. Most recently, a 454-foot moonshot off of Max Scherzer. The guy is locked in. Scott, my main question for you, where are the pearls, man? You're not rocking the pearl necklace.
I'm not. Maybe I should. Even Dale Murphy broke it out when he was throwing the first pitch before Game 2 on Sunday. He pulled out the pearls to celebrate Joctober.
I was trying to research to find out like what's behind this whole phenomenon of Joc Pederson wearing the pearls.
There's nothing behind it.
Yeah, there's no backstory, right?
He said I can't really say what he said, but his explanation for why he's wearing the pearls is he's a bad witch. Except he didn't say witch.
All right. Well, yeah. Halloween season is here, so we will we'll leave it at that. Maybe you could dye your hair blonde like Joc Pederson has, Scott. Some kind of. Can we do that if the Braves win the World Series? Can we get you to like bleach blonde the hair, Scotty?
Probably not.
Oh, come on. All right. Well, outside of like if you don't reside in Texas or I guess in Massachusetts, somewhere in the Northeast, then the chances are you're probably rooting for the National League right now. So that's exactly what I'm doing. Let's go Braves. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, look, if the Dodgers advance, I will be sad for you, Scotty. But
these are, let's not downplay the excitement of these first 2 games here. Both walk-off wins. The first, I think I was reading from Jason Stark today, the first time a best of 7 series has started with 2 walk-off wins. And the first time, I believe, consecutive games a team's walked off since the Braves-Twins World Series in 1991 when the Braves did it twice. So, heart-stopping games, Frank. I was a little stressed this weekend watching them, especially the 8th inning of Game 2 when the Braves seemed hell-bent on making the second out on the base paths and managed to avoid it every time. And that's the inning where they were able to pull even. So yeah, that was fun. That was fun because everybody was safe every time. But yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, exciting to say the least. Look, we lead with Joc Pederson, what he's doing to this point. He's obviously having a great postseason for them, but Eddie Rosario, man, what a game in Game 2. Goes 4 for 4. A few very close base running plays, which you just mentioned. The play at home, the slide that he had was just fantastic. So, yeah, it's been an awesome start to the NLCS and the ALCS. I mean, we're recording this on Monday, and the Red Sox are absolutely destroying the Astros. So let's see where that series goes from there. Before we hit second base, got a few news items that I want to talk about. Most notably, Fernando Tatis will not have shoulder surgery. He has opted against it, and he is confident that he'll be able to strengthen the shoulder this offseason as an alternative to having that surgery. But basically everything that you read from like sports doctors or Twitter doctors, I guess, like even pro football doctors.
Real doctors or just people who are pretending they're doctors on Twitter?
Some kind of combination. But
Okay.
Dr. David Chow actually is a doctor, and he is a Padres fan. And he said repeatedly that Fernando Tatis will need surgery at some point. So I don't know. Maybe he's young enough where like he can rehab this and he'll be fine for next year. But it is worrisome because you're going to have to spend what's likely at least a top 3 pick. Maybe some people get scared off and he slips, lower into the top 5, but he's not escaping the first round. So
yeah, there's a lot to dive into here. And I was tweeting a lot about it earlier today because it seemed like the initial reaction from people on Twitter, both people who, are in the fantasy baseball industry and just people who, just commenters chiming in, the reactions seem to be, well, if he's not going to have surgery. We obviously have to downgrade him. And I was kind of surprised by that reaction because I figured surgery or not, we're going to be worried about Tatis's shoulder going into next year. Because, I mean, look at Cody Bellinger, his dislocation, and he's had all kinds of trouble coming back from his shoulder surgery last offseason. It wasn't going to be a quick recovery for Fernando Tatis. I think people were a little too sanguine about the surgical intervention option if this is how they're responding to Tatis not having it. And of course, I'm not a doctor. I presume he's getting advice from doctors in making this decision. And the other thing that maybe there's some confusion about, and it's possible I'm confused. I tried looking back at articles from earlier this year to get to the bottom of it. Now, the shoulder injury for Tatis first came to our attention in spring training. Remember, he made a play in the field and came off the field wincing. Had his left arm tucked up, and we're all freaked out at that point about Tatis. They quickly ruled out any kind of long-term absence for him. But the way it was described at the time is he's had problems with this shoulder dating back to his time in the minor leagues, and these flare-ups would happen occasionally, even way back then. And then, so later he had following through on a swing. Tatis hurt the shoulder again, left the game. We were all worried he was going to miss the season. It ended up being just a very short absence. And then I think there was a third episode during the season, right?
Yeah.
On a slide, maybe.
I had to eat my hat because of it. Remember that?
Well, I think that was on the check swing one, the second episode. But my point is, I think those were all flare-ups of the same thing, right? He's been dealing with this for years. It wasn't something that just happened this year, and he's managed to manage it without anybody knowing about it really until this year. And he seems confident that he can continue to avoid surgery through strengthening exercises. He ended up missing about 20 games this year with the injury, which all things considered isn't that much. He hit 46 home runs, I believe it was, stole 25 bases.
He actually missed 32 games, Scotty. But you're right.
But with the injury itself, I think I read it was like 22 or something. There may have been something else.
Yeah, there was a COVID situation with him.
Yeah,
he still hit 282, 42 homers, and had 25 steals.
42 home runs. So I don't know. I still see him as the top player next year. I'm not totally like. Obviously, there are still concerns about the shoulder, and you have to weigh the risk and reward there. I just think the reward is so high. Like, there's not really, except for maybe Acuna, who of course has his own concerns coming off a torn ACL. For a 5x5 league, there's nobody who really approaches that kind of upside that Tatis has. And he dealt with the injury this year, again, going back to spring training. So whole season, he dealt with it fine, still performed like technically not the top player in fantasy, but pretty close, and certainly the top one on a per game basis. I don't really feel motivated to move him down from the top spot, but I'm also the guy who currently ranks Acuna second for Roto leagues. I think we'll have a clearer sense of how that's going to go as draft season actually approaches, and maybe I'll move Acuna down if it doesn't sound like he's going to be ready in time. But I don't feel particularly worried about either. There are risks there, but nobody's really a slam dunk. And I think we've already seen Tatis play through this, and he was awesome, And Acuna torn ACL. I mean, that's something people come back from all the time. I just think they're both going to be worth taking that high, even acknowledging, yes, there's some obvious risk there. I just don't think it's enough to scare me away.
Yep. Tatis still finished as the 5th overall player in 5x5 Roto leagues this past year, despite missing those 30 games. And he averaged just about 4 fantasy points per game, which was tied for the most with Vladimir Guerrero. So on a per game basis, I mean, that's
a points measurement. I would say probably not take Tatis first in points leagues now, because there are more who can compete with him in that format. But with that power speed combination in 5x5, Roto leagues, I just don't think there's much comparison for that, except Acuna, who of course has his own concerns.
All right. Well, the glass half full, the positive spin on Fernando Tatis here from Scotty. We'll see. We'll see how Fernando Tatis is doing. I don't know, 2-3 months from now. The Cardinals have parted ways with their manager Mike Schilt, which I think caught some people by surprise.
Oh,
or
yeah.
maybe not, because I don't know. I saw a few Cardinals fans on Twitter that were like, okay with this happening. I don't know. By all accounts, it seemed like Mike Schilt was a pretty good manager, so it kind of caught me off guard. But
Well, all but Padre fans were stunned by it because I think, he'd been such a fixture in the organization and the team had had so much success under him. Most of it pretty unexpected. It seemed like they consistently outperformed under Mike Schilt. And the Cardinals GM, whose name I can never say right, John Mozeliak, right?
yeah, right. We'll go with that.
Say it for me.
No, you got it
right. Yeah, he said it didn't have anything to. They thought Mike Schilt managed the club well. It was just philosophical differences, and he wouldn't go into what those philosophical differences were. But a lot of Cardinals fans I saw, he didn't bring so and so into the game and into the wild card game in this inning. They were trying to pin it all to one bullpen decision, which is just a dumb thing fans do sometimes. Like, I feel like the easiest thing for a fan base to harp on a manager about is bullpen management. There's never been a manager who's good at bullpen management. Like, that's just, they're all bad. Because right. Sometimes moves backfire, right? Like, it's just easy to say, oh, he should have done this instead. I know that was the top complaint for Cardinals fans about Mike Matheny, the previous manager. Like, no fan base is ever satisfied with how the manager uses the bullpen. So I do feel certain that was not the reason Mike Schilt was fired. I suspect there was some kind of argument and maybe things got too heated, or maybe maybe the front office just wanted more top-down control, more direct control over what was happening on the field than Schilt was willing to give them. So he's out. My guess is he becomes the Padres' next manager, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I think any team would be happy to get Mike Schilt. So we'll see if he latches on right away. Oftentimes, we'll see where a manager's let go and maybe he takes a year off and then rejoins. But I don't know. I think there's a good chance that Mike Schilt latches on here with someone. So we'll see if it is the Padres indeed. I did want to give a few Arizona Fall League updates. This is really the first time in my life that I've followed it close-ish, but there's not really much else going on right now. Well, there's football, obviously, and there's postseason baseball. But if you want like a daily fix for baseball, you can follow Arizona Fall League box scores. Spencer Torkelson and Brett Beatty, that's the Tigers' top prospect and one of the Mets' top prospects, respectively. They are both 7 for 14 so far in the AFL. And there are 3 hitters who have 2 home runs each. The Rockies' first base prospect, Michael Toglia, and then Lars Nootbaar, friend of the program. Not really, because we've never had him on, but fun name to say, so we'll call him a friend. And then Reds middle infield prospect, Ivan Johnson. They each have 2 home runs here in Arizona Fall League. Anything else happens, I will let you know. I think at some point we'll probably do a podcast where we talk about what's happened overall in the Arizona Fall League. Maybe we'll get the Welsh on because he's obviously following it very closely, and he's awesome with prospects. So we'll do that sometime soon. I don't know, maybe within the next month. We'll take a break from these early previews. But speaking of which, let's jump right into second base, the year in review. We'll do it the same way we have the past couple. We'll take a look at the top 10 in Roto this past season. And then after that, we will take an early look at Scott's rankings. But number one, no surprise, Trey Turner will have both second base and shortstop eligibility heading into next year. And he finishes as the number one second baseman. 328 batting average, 28 homers, 107 runs scored, 77 RBI, and 32 steals. He finishes as the number 3 overall player in Roto. And I have a feeling, Scott, that really regardless of format, like Roto, he's going to be a top 5 pick very easily in my mind. Maybe in points leagues, he slips a little bit, but I still think he's a first round pick.
Trey Turner?
Yeah, in points leagues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Let me see if I can pull up real quickly what he averaged in head-to-head points leagues this past year. 3.74. So that was the highest at second base, the highest among second base eligible players. The next closest was Marcus Semien at 3.66. And then after that, Jose Altuve at 3.6. And I'm just going to keep saying names. And next would be Ozzie Albies at 3.45. And then there's a pretty big drop off. Oh, no, there was. Okay. Anyway, yeah, Trey Turner was by far the highest scoring second baseman, even in points leagues on a per game basis. So, yes, I would agree that, especially now that he has that dual eligibility. And he's become less steals focused as he's gotten older here. He actually only stole 32 bases this past year, which, remember when he first started his career, well, he kept getting hurt, but it was on like a 60 steal pace, a 70 steal pace. So I think you could actually make the case that Trey Turner maybe stacks up, maybe is even a little better suited for points leagues than Roto.
No.
You know what? I'm going to make that argument about somebody else. I think I was making the argument I meant to make about Whit Merrifield for Trey Turner. But anyway, let's keep going. Off to a great start here.
No, that's fine. I've already seen some early drafts where Turner goes as the first overall pick in Roto, and I don't think that he has the same upside as a Tatis or Acuna, but just so safe. Batting average well over 300 each of the past 2 seasons. Still going to give you some speed. Power has really come on here for Trey Turner the past couple of years, so I would be perfectly fine making that argument in a Roto league. Number 2 at the position was Marcus Semien. He had 265, 45 homers, 115 runs, 102 RBI, 15 steals, the number 7 overall player in Roto this past season. Just a monster season, a prove-it deal, 1 year with the Toronto Blue Jays, and I would imagine he's going to get paid by somebody. I don't know who that's going to be. He is an unrestricted free agent, but this is now 2 of the past 3 years, Scott, where Semien has finished top 20 overall in Roto. So to me, I'm starting to look at that 2020 as the outlier. I don't know that he's going to be, a top 20 player again, but even with some slight regression, if he's a second or third round pick, I think because of the power and speed, he could still live up to that.
Yeah, I have him as a second rounder. I've pointed out before that, we don't know where he's going and where he ultimately winds up might change my thinking. If he winds up in Detroit, if he winds up in San Francisco for some reason, I guess that's possible. If he winds up in a harder place to hit, then maybe he drops out of my second round. But he actually hit the majority of his home runs on the road this year. So I don't think we can credit his performance all to the favorable hitter environment he ended up in. Of course, in 2019, that other year referring to, he was in Oakland, which is not a very good place to hit. So, it's hard to square that short 2020 season where he was pretty awful with the 2 great seasons on each side of it. Because, I was seeing that, especially after the way last year went. That 2019 season was looking like an outlier for Marcus Semien, and I do know you and I both had him as somebody to avoid on draft day, and we ended up looking pretty stupid because he just kept hitting home runs. So I'm not particularly, I don't see much reason to write him off, but it'll depend kind of where he ends up signing.
The only thing that stands out to me is his quality of contact is really not great, especially for someone who just hit 45 home runs. So 241 XBA, 444 expected slug. Those are both well below his actual numbers.
Right. He was
that you buy into, then, you might be wary of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And he was, I did give Marcus Semien the award for biggest overachiever when we did the awards show because of that disparity between his expected stats and his actual stats. And I'm glad you brought it up. But that's kind of why I referred to him hitting most of his home runs on the road, because I don't know, to me that counts for something. Now, I will point out that he was playing in the AL East, which has the most hitter friendly parks of any division. So, a lot of his road games were obviously in those parks, but still, he steals some bases too, gets on base a lot. There's a lot to like. He doesn't have to hit 40. What was it? 43,
45.
45. He doesn't have to hit 45 home runs again to be worth a second-round pick.
No, he doesn't. If he hits 30 homers with 10 to 12 steals and the counting stats that you get in the Blue Jays lineup, that's likely worth a second or even third round pick for next year. Number 3 at the position was Ozzie Albies. He finished 259 batting average, 30 homers, 103 runs, 106 RBI, 20 steals. So really, can't call him a 5 category contributor because the batting average was low-ish, 259. It's better than league average, but it's not like he's a contributor. But he did contribute in the other 4 categories for sure. Finished as the number 16 overall player. He's a lot like Bo Bichette, where he has power and speed, but he's doing it with a lower OPS. He really doesn't walk all that much. And the splits, if you're someone who's like scared of bad splits, well, you shouldn't be for Albies because this is just who he is. Even though he's a switch hitter, he crushes left-handed pitching, and he's quite like mediocre against right-handed pitching. And that's who he's always been. And he still finds a way to put up these massive fantasy seasons. So because of that, I'm not really worried about it.
No, I mean, that's just, he's not that great from the left side of the plate.
It's so weird.
You get so many more at-bats there. He ended up hitting 21 home runs from the left side of the plate.
Okay, so he gets more power from that side.
No, he doesn't get more power. I'm just saying I don't want to overstate it either and say you don't want to start him on the days he's facing a right-handed pitcher, but he had 237 with 749 OPS and against righties 323 with a 940 OPS.
Why doesn't he just try it though? Like, why doesn't he just try batting righty against right-handed pitching?
I would love for him to. I mean, obviously Cedric Mullins, I think he was batting exclusively left-handed, right, this year?
Yeah, the past 2 years, since the start of last year. Or maybe it started this year.
I think it started this year. But yeah, I mean, I've said for a few years now that switch hitting, I think it's overrated, and I think a lot of players would benefit from giving it up and looking at Ozzie Albies splits, considering he's so much better against from the side where he sees the least reps, because usually what ends up happening with switch hitters is they become much better from the left side. Even if they don't start out that way, they're just seeing so many more pitches from the left side that it ends up being their better side. And Ozzie Albies being that much better consistently from the right side, even though he doesn't see as many pitches there, like that just makes me wonder how good he could be. He ends up being an extreme fly ball hitter because that's basically all he does from the left side is just golf it. And that keeps his batting average, lower than you'd expect it to be, given his strikeout rate. I think it's safe to view him as like a 260, 265 hitter. He did have 1 year where he hit 295, but I think that's going to be more the exception than the rule. So that's really his downside, is relative to other players you draft in the 3rd round range, let's say. Ozzie Albies probably not going to give you as much batting average, but he'll give you a useful number of steals. He'll give you a useful amount of power. The run and RBI production will be great because that Braves lineup is so strong. And I think he's pretty much locked into that 3rd round range at this point in his career. But yeah, Frank, I don't want to keep harping on those splits, but he actually did have 5 at bats from the right side against a right-handed pitcher this year. I don't know who it was. I don't know why he made that decision, but
he
did have 5 at bats from the right side against a right-handed pitcher, and he homered in 2 of them.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's interesting. I would love to ask somebody in like the Braves organization. I don't know how I would contact anyone in the Braves organization, but man, that is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I've got to look more into that, but we'll see.
Changing subjects again. I meant to point this out. So Ozzie Albies is 3rd here in terms of where he finished, right?
Yep.
1 and 2, Trey Turner and Marcus Semien, they wouldn't have been eligible here entering this season. So, if this season hadn't just happened, if they hadn't just gotten 20 games at second base, then Ozzie Albies, we'd be talking about him as number 1. So that we're going to see this as a theme throughout second base. The number of players who we think of playing other positions, picking up second base eligibility in 2021 and then carrying it over to 2022. It's a lot of them, and it's make the position much deeper and much stronger than we're used to seeing. Second base is not a weak position anymore. In fact, it might be the strongest infield position. First base is deeper, but it's deep in kind of mid-tier talent. Um, shortstop is, has a lot of really high-end talent, but it thins out very quickly. I don't know. Second base is at least similar to those two, and then third base is by far the weakest, by far.
Oh, we're gonna have a fun podcast on Thursday talking about third base. But speaking of what you just brought up about these other names up top, Jorge Polanco, I believe, did not have second base eligibility coming into the season.
He was Jonathan India didn't.
Yep, and we'll talk about him in just a little bit too.
Javier Baez didn't.
Correct.
Jazz Chisholm. No, I think Jazz Chisholm did actually.
Yeah, he might have. Jorge Polanco, by the way, 269 batting average, 33 homers, 97 runs, 98 RBI, 11 steals. Scott, close your ears, close your eyes. About to bring up some stats here. 555 OPS in April. That's when Scott dropped him. And then an 813.
I dropped him in May. I gave him 2 solid months to turn things around.
Yeah, he got off to a slow start in May as well. 813 OPS or better in every other month, including 2 over a 900 OPS. So I don't know that I'm buying the power per se here, Scott. Maybe, age 27 season, maybe just finally tapped into that in-game power. I noticed his pull rate was way high. It was like near 53%. He was below 40% the previous 3 seasons. So that seems to have unlocked some power for him. And when you look at the other Twins power hitters the past couple of seasons, all of them just started pulling the ball like crazy. So I wonder if it's just some kind of organizational thing, but yeah, Polanco was amazing.
Yeah, and he was great in 2019 too. Only 2/3 of the home run production, but he hit 295 with 22 home runs. It was basically a must-start player in 2019, and then had some ankle trouble last year, which is why I was so high on him coming into this season. I thought he was in for a bounce back season. It took a while for him to come around, and the bounce back ended up being even bigger than I thought it could be with that increased home run production. But he doesn't strike out much. He's consistently kept his strikeout rate below 20%. In some years, it's closer to 15%. And also, he hardly ever puts the ball on the ground. The career ground ball rate of 33.5. If somebody has like a 40% ground ball rate, that's not bad. His is well below that. A lot of line drives, which helps batting average, a lot of fly balls, which helps power production. Combined with that low strikeout rate, it's a little surprising he hit only 269, and there may be some amount of trade-off with the batting average and the home runs, depending on how often he's putting the ball in the air. But I don't know. To me, that points to a pretty high floor. I'm not expecting him to repeat the stat line next year, but I would consider him a top 10 second baseman for next year. Not top 5, but top 10.
As we will reveal in just a little bit. Number 5 at the position, Jose Altuve, 278 batting average, 31 homers, 117 runs scored, 83 RBI, and 5 steals. He now has exactly 31 home runs in 2 of the past 3 seasons. He had a career high fly ball rate, also had a career high infield fly ball rate, way up, like 18% infield fly ball rate this year. Basically just selling out for power at this point. It didn't completely sink his batting average or anything. It was a great season for Altuve. It seems like I'm talking down about him, but
he's a different player now.
He's interesting because he excels in 2 categories, home runs and runs. And then he's just kind of okay in batting average, RBI, and steals, which isn't a bad thing. But
well, he used to be the preeminent batting average source, right? Back when he was a first rounder. And he used to be an elite base stealer on top of it. He's basically given up running, even though he's still fast. It's just not something he does anymore. And he's traded off the batting average for power, really sells out for power, hitting the ball in the air, pulling the ball in the air a lot, which works out because of that short porch in left field in his home park. He hit 19 of his 31 home runs at home, had a 932 OPS there versus 750 on the road. He's not leaving for a few more years. He's not going to be a free agent for a few years, so he still gets to enjoy that park, and he seemed like he's really tailored his swing for it. And certainly we're not going to have the same level of concern about Jose Altuve going into next year that we did going into this year when he was coming off, of course, the sign stealing scandal, and so people were already inclined to doubt him, and then he had a really bad regular season performance, short as it was. Came around in the playoffs, which is why I know we were high on him on this podcast. But I think pretty much put everybody's concerns to rest. And I mentioned in points leagues, he was third in points per game after Turner and SEMIEN. His skill set's probably a little more geared for points leagues now because there's not many steals and there's not many strikeouts. There's never been many strikeouts for him. So that may impact it. But the fact that, it's debatable. The fact that we can debate fifth is where he finished in Roto last year.
Yep.
And there's others that are going to come after them that we could debate putting ahead of him. It's just a really crowded position in this range that we're talking about now.
And I'm with you. I might argue that he's better in points leagues at this point. It doesn't make him bad in Roto or anything, but it's just kind of what his skill set is at this point. So Jose Altuve has been a high quality second baseman for a long time. And if you enjoy high quality meat, you need to try Butcher Box. No more searching the grocery store for 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, or wild-caught seafood. Get it delivered right to your door today with Butcher Box. My fiance and I made chili this weekend using their ground beef, and oh my goodness gracious, it was amazing. It was so tasty and fresh. Can't recommend it enough. Every month, Butcher Box will ship a curated selection of high-quality meat right to your home. Each box contains 8 to 14 pounds of meat. Depending on your box type, that's enough for 24 individual meals. Customize your box or go with one of theirs. Either way, you get exactly what you want. Right now, Butcher Box is offering new members a 10 to 16 pound turkey free in their first box. Just go to butcherbox.com/FBT to sign up. That's butcherbox.com/FBT to receive a free turkey in your first box. Thanksgiving's on the way. Who doesn't want a free turkey? Come on. Again, butcherbox.com/FBT. Number 6 at second base this past season, Whit Merrifield. He hit 277, 10 homers, 97 runs scored, 40 steals. The steals were second most in MLB. He is a compiler, and I'm not saying this in a bad way. Availability is the best ability, and that is what Whit Merrifield offers. He has played every single game over the past 3 seasons. That is almost impossible. Like today's age, any sport that you want to talk about is just insane. The fact that Whit Merrifield has been able to do that. However, he's turning 33 in January. Slugging percentage, ISO, home run to fly ball rate, they were all career lows for him. So I don't really think that we can count on him for much, if any, kind of power production, Scott. And it wouldn't surprise me if that just like completely falls off the face of the earth.
Yeah. So he used to be, at his very best, he was a good source of batting average and a passable source of home run. Like he wouldn't set you back that much in the home run category for a guy who you drafted predominantly for steals. But that appears to be not the case. He seems more one-dimensional than ever. Still led the AL with 40 steals. He was one of 2 guys with more than 35 steals in all the majors. So still a standout in that most coveted category. And that's why he's going to rank higher in Roto leagues and 5x5 leagues than he will in points leagues. But I think his skill set has kind of shifted a little, that it actually looks like a points league skill set because he still doesn't strike out much. He hits a ton of doubles. He led the majors with 42 doubles. He does things that scoring format rewards that Roto doesn't. This was the argument I meant to make for him, but I started making for Trey Turner for some reason because I got mixed up. So just because of the extreme scarcity of stolen bases and how much you have to pay up for him, he ends up going higher in roto leagues, but I think it's going to feel like less of a concession to draft Merrifield as your starter in a points league next year. I mean, like I think if you draft him in roto, you're designing your team in a certain way that just, okay, I'm going to take this hit in the offensive categories to get this big glob of steals here early on. But you really have to design the rest of your draft around that pick. When in points leagues, you draft Whit Merrifield as your starter halfway through the draft, and it's just going to be a good starter for you. So I don't know, kind of a weird player in that way.
And I have a feeling that Whit Merrifield's still going to be drafted decently high in roto leagues next year. And look, he's going to be a standout in steals. He's likely going to score runs, but really not giving you much else. Especially like batting average is fine, but like he's not a contributor in that anymore. So I think he might get overdrafted in that format in next year. Number 7 at the position, we have Brandon Lau. He hit 247 with 39 homers, 97 runs, 99 RBI, and 7 steals. He got off to an awful start. His first 2 months, he hit 189 with a 31% strikeout rate. His final 4 months, he hit 272. Strikeouts came down about 6 percentage points, 933 OPS from June 1st on for Brandon Lau. Yeah. I know he's inconsistent, Scott, like overall throughout the course of the season, but like you look at the last 3 seasons, Scott, like his final numbers are consistent. Like they are what they are. I think he's going to hit 250 to 260 with big power, great counting stats in that lineup, and 6 to 8 steals. So like the road to the end of the season might be frustrating, but that's kind of just who he is at this point.
Well, the thing is, we got a chance to see it play out over a full season, really, for the first time. He played 149 games this year. His high previously was 82. So, we didn't really know what a full season of Brandon Lau looked like. And with as many extreme ups and downs as there's been for him over his career, and of course this year included, I think that was important. Obviously, 39 home runs. I think that we made a big deal of the record that Salvador Perez set at catcher, the home run record at catcher. Brandon Lau, let's see, I think Davey Johnson holds the record at 43 for a second baseman. Brandon Lau had 39. He wasn't far. He was closing in on his own record. Now, I think he hit 3 home runs on the second to last day of the season. So,
well, didn't SEMIEN just technically break the record because he was at second base?
That's it. Yep. Yeah. That's it. Yep. So SEMIEN owns that record now. Man, misremembering things here. It's October. I can get away with it.
It's actually Joctober, Scott, but I'll let you know.
Yeah, sure. So what was I going to say? So Brandon Lau, he hit 3 home runs on the second to last day of the season, right? So he very quickly went from mid 30s to almost 40, and the number he put up in that column stands out more because of that. But the point is, I feel like we can go into next season with a higher level of trust in him than we've ever had before, and we can ride out these highs and lows a little easier, and we can be a little less stressed about that investment in Brandon Lau. So that's good. I mean, it clearly puts him in this group with Altuve and Merrifield and whatever. He's clearly a high-end second baseman now. The reason I'm going to rank him certainly behind Altuve, behind a couple others that we haven't gotten to yet, is because the Rays still sat him sometimes against lefties. And that if you can't count on him being an everyday player, that hurts. That hurts.
Definitely hurts in points leagues too. I mean, where volume matters more there. So Lau hit 198 with a 662 OPS against lefties. It's quite bad. So I can't really blame the Rays at this point for benching him there. Number 8 at the position was Javier Baez. He had 265, 31 homers, 18 steals, awful plate discipline once again, a near 34% strikeout rate, just a 5% walk rate. And it's very frustrating for me because last year was the first time I finally bought into Javier Baez, Scott, and he was, I don't know, like there's a lot of people that had these random awful shortened seasons because whatever, it was obviously an odd year with COVID and everything. but I'm just so frustrated because then the next year he bounces back and he was awesome this past year. I really don't know what to make of Javier Baez. It's awful plate discipline, but he's such a great athlete that he's able to like overcome it.
Yeah. He's become a more extreme version of himself, because the scary thing about investing in Javier Baez has been, okay, he puts up pretty good numbers, borderline elite numbers, particularly for roto leagues, but he relies on an outlier BABIP. He relies on an outlier home run to fly ball rate. He has to, because his plate discipline is so bad. And what happens if those kind of come back down to earth? And for the most part, they haven't. But the thing is, the plate discipline got even worse this year, 33.6% strikeout rate. And yet the BABIP became even more of an outlier. The home run to fly ball rate became even more of an outlier. Like the thing we expected him to regress in, he got better at. And I just, like, whenever that crashes, and maybe it won't until his mid-30s, but whenever it does, it's going to be a hard fall. Really hard fall for Javier Baez. So, you have to rank him pretty high, but he's never somebody I'm going to be thrilled to draft. And I certainly somebody you rank higher in 5x5 leagues than in points.
Yeah. The plate discipline is just going to absolutely crush him in points leagues where you lose points for strikeouts, obviously. He also did this in a contract year, so he's a free agent as well. Let's see where Javier Baez lands. That obviously could affect his value as well. Max Muncy finished number 9 at the position. We spoke about him a little bit on the First Base podcast. The strikeout rate was a career best for him. He made more contact. He did slow down over the final 2 months, but was kind of dealing with some injuries and stuff. I think we kind of know who Max Muncy is at this point. 250, 260 batting average, lots of power, really good OBP. He's better in points league. So skip him for now. Number 10, I did want to talk about Jonathan India. 269 batting average, 21 homers, 98 runs, 69 RBI, and 12 steals. And we've seen this before, Scott, where there's like these prospects that come up and they just perform much better in the major leagues than they did in the minors. Maybe Jonathan India is just the next name to do that, but he never hit more than 11 home runs or had higher than an 814 OPS in any level at any season in the minors. So I will just point that out. But he was great. Basically, from June 1st on, he was amazing. So what do you think about India?
Yeah, he wasn't in the minors for that long. It's worth pointing out. Very, very quick path to the majors. And did you mention the numbers over the final 4 months?
No, I didn't mention it, but yeah.
Okay, so if you give him a pass for April and May. Obviously, April was just a disastrous month for hitting around the league. I'm willing to give everybody a pass for April. May, obviously rookie breaking into the majors. You could understand that taking some time, but the final 4 months. Let's see. I'm getting different numbers than you wrote down here. I have him. What are we leaving out? Did you leave out his October numbers by chance? Why are our numbers different?
Maybe I did.
Yeah. It looks like you left out the 2 days in October. So I'm going to include the 2 days in October. From June 1st on, Jonathan India hit 281 with 18 home runs in 2/3 of the season, 18 home runs, 10 steals, and an 882 OPS. Now, a lot of that OPS was on base percentage, which we don't care about in 5x5 leagues. We do in points leagues. But, that's pretty studly. That's pretty studly. It's sad that he loses third base eligibility. He was primarily a third baseman in the minors. Didn't play a single game there in the majors this year. So exclusively a second baseman. And that's not the position we need him at the most. But I would say with those numbers, and the kind of potential he showed over the final 2/3 of the season, he's clearly top 12 at this position. And I would put him even in the top 10 in points leagues, where Baez would probably drop behind him. And obviously the walk rate gets a little more credit in the points leagues.
Yep. And he's still obviously under team control, but Nick Castellanos, I believe, does have a player option that it sounds like he's going to opt out of. So obviously that could affect everybody around him, Jesse Winker, Joey Votto, but of course, Jonathan India, who was leading off for the Reds. But if Castellanos returns, then that obviously is a really good lineup and a great ballpark to hit in. But if Castellanos leaves, then that obviously puts a little bit of a damper on the Cincinnati Reds.
He's probably going to be the leadoff hitter, though. India is either way. So that
Sure.
We like that in fantasy, obviously, also.
Yeah, gives us more volume, more plate appearances, obviously helps in points leagues. And for Roto, it's going to allow him to run a little bit and obviously score a ton of runs as well. We'll take a quick break. When we return, early 2022 second base rankings here on Fantasy Baseball Today. All right, so let's take a look at Scott's top 20 at the position. They're currently live on the site if you want to follow along with us. The top 5 here, we have Trey Turner, Marcus Semien, Ozzie Albies, Jose Altuve, and Whit Merrifield. Again, the top 5: Turner, Semien, Albies, Jose Altuve, and Merrifield. And
So,
I'm not. Go ahead.
So this is a position because there's a lot of low strikeout guys and a lot of high steal guys. You're going to see more differentiation between the 5x5 rankings and the points rankings. And so just to clarify, what you're giving here are the 5x5 rankings. Whit Merrifield, as I said, would rank lower in points leagues. There'll maybe be less of a concession at points leagues. He would be 8th in points leagues rather than 5th. Max Muncy would actually be 5th in points leagues. And I believe that's the only change here. Those are the only changes in the top 5. Go ahead with your question.
No, it was just, I don't know if you technically answered it when we were talking about Merrifield. I think you did, though, right? Like, how much are you worried about the age, lack of power for him?
I'm not counting on a return to being the 19 homer guy he was at his highest. I think, I think for Whit Merrifield, I'm just kind of expecting him to repeat this year's stat line. Maybe not exactly, but I think that's what his skill set points to now.
I do wonder that he's been a compiler and he's managed to stay healthy, but the older he gets, maybe he could start to deal with injuries. Like, if there's ever a season where he does deal with anything, obviously it's going to affect the overall numbers because, again, like, he just depends on volume and the fact that he plays every single day to meet those numbers. So if anything ever happens, just keep that in mind for Whit Merrifield. 6 through 10, we have Max Muncy, Brandon Lau, Ketel Marte, Javier Baez, and Jorge Polanco. We have not talked about Ketel Marte yet. He actually was very good this year. The problem is he only played 90 games. So he hit 318, 14 homers, a 909 OPS for Ketel Marte. And obviously, injuries have been an issue. He has missed 39% of his possible games over the past 2 seasons due to a bunch of different injuries. And his latest update actually had the Diamondbacks GM saying that Ketel Marte is going to focus on one position next year. And it sounds like they're leaning towards second base because that's what he played more towards the end of the year. And the Diamondbacks have an outfield prospect in Alek Thomas, who's pretty close to the majors as well. So for all those reasons, I think that he'll be at second base. But do you have any thoughts on Ketel Marte?
I think he's great. His expected batting average this year was 303. You don't see an expected batting average above 300 very often. Obviously he hit 318, so it was even better than that. But for expected stats, you don't see as much. You don't see as much on the as high end point. The end points aren't as high and low as the actual batting averages end up being, just because that's the way that sort of thing works. But Ketel Marte, between injuries, I think really validated that breakthrough 2019 season he had, where I would say he was the best second baseman in fantasy in that breakthrough 2019 season. The power production wasn't nearly as good as in 2020, as short as it was. But this year he's still, his average exit velocity was 91.1. His hard hit rate was 48.4. I mean, those are the kind of numbers you'd expect from a power hitter. And after getting off to a slow start with the home runs, Ketel Marte ended up hitting 10 over the final 2 months. So he ended up with 14 in 340 at bats. a little more than half a season, basically. Ended up with 14 home runs. So, a guy who's going to hit probably over 300, maybe about 290, let's say 290, 300. Ketel Marte will hit with 25 homers, good plate discipline numbers, provided he stays healthy, of course. And I think that firmly puts him in the second tier at this position. You have Trey Turner, the obvious first rounder, Marcus Semien, the second rounder, Ozzie Albies, the third rounder. But then you have this glut of names like Jose Altuve, Max Muncy, Brandon Lau, Ketel Marte, and Whit Merrifield. I mean, Marte's right there with them, and that's an impressive group in its own right. I mean, you're not going to feel bad about having any of those guys as your starting second baseman.
I don't think that I would depend on him for much of anything in terms of steals anymore.
No.
He only had 2 this year. He had 1 in the shortened season. However, he did deal with a hamstring injury that was, one of his ailments this year. So maybe he gets you like 6 to 8, but it's not really something that I would bank on from.
And that group I just named, by the way, I didn't include Jorge Polanco, who was 4th at the position this year in roto production.
Yeah.
I didn't include Javier Baez. You could. Maybe I should. Maybe I'd include Polanco in points leagues. Maybe I'd include Baez in roto. But that's a lot of talent at that position, that'll last pretty deep into the draft. I mean, maybe through round like 7, round 8. Pretty strong group there.
A strong group indeed, and it rolls on 11 through 15 at second base. Jonathan India, Jake Cronenworth, Jazz Chisholm, Tommy Edman, and Brendan Rodgers. So some very interesting names here. And I'm going to start with one that I think specifically in roto leagues, I'm going to be pretty excited about for next year. Jazz Chisholm, 18 homers, 23 steals in only 124 games this year. The problem is he's kind of an enigma. Like, he's hard to figure out. 311 batting average, 969 OPS the first month of the season, 236 batting average, 681 OPS the final 5 months. Now, he dealt with a bunch of injuries during that stretch, but this is just one of those kind of like eye testing, Scott, where I've seen enough from Jazz Chisholm to know that he is a really talented baseball player. Like, he hit a mammoth home run off of Jacob deGrom on a pitch that was like at his eyes, and it was like 101 miles per hour, and he like hit it to the upper deck. And on top of that, he has like blazing speed. So I think I've seen enough to know that he's talented.
Oh, he's definitely talented. And honestly, given the way his minor league career played out, I would have expected worse than a 28.6% strikeout rate from him as a rookie. I mean, it's not a good strikeout rate, but we see guys with like 35% strikeout rates hold down jobs in the majors. And, I assume Jazz Chisholm would be more in that range. He did hit only 228 in the second half after a hot start, had an 662 OPS in the second half. So a lot of development still to be done here with Jazz Chisholm. But for playing only 124 games, there were some injuries in there. 124 games. He had 18 home runs, 23 steals. I mean, you just project that out over 160 games, and obviously that's a guy you want to have in your roto lineup. Less so in points leagues. And I'd knock Tommy Edman down a few spots in points leagues as well. Chisholm and Edman both have that stolen base element that is so coveted in 5x5, but less so in points leagues. So you can knock them down a few spots there. They wouldn't be top 15 for me. But they are going to be players who are drafted to start. I think there's a clear drop-off here still. Maybe you include India with the Jorge Polanco, Ketel Marte tier. Maybe not. I think he's right on the border of that. But then when you get past India to Cronenworth, Chisholm, Edman, certainly Brendan Rodgers, you're not dealing with the same assurances. Not clear exactly what the upside is. I don't think Cronenworth and Edman have the same kind of upside. Jazz Chisholm maybe, but as I said, not a lot of assurances there. So, this is the point where you probably don't want to wait this long to get your starting second baseman, but as a middle infielder, in a roto league, they're obviously going to be useful for you.
Well, Scott, what if I told you there are some very early drafts going on right now, and I saw via Bench with Bubba. Let me find his Twitter because we've had him on the podcast before. He does great work, and I want to give credit where it's due. But he tweeted out at BD Entric on Twitter. He revealed a draft that he did at First Pitch Arizona this past weekend, and Jazz Chisholm in a 15-team league went in the 6th round, and he went ahead of Jorge Polanco, Jose Altuve, Jonathan India, and looks like Javier Baez. It's kind of blurry, but even like this is the problem is that
that's an NFBC league, right?
This is a draft and hold, so it's not like there is an overall aspect to it. So yes, people draft for more upside there,
right? People take very big swings on high variance players like Jazz Chisholm in that kind of like it wouldn't be me. But it wouldn't be me who's competing for the top overall prize of how many teams, right? Like if I just aim to win my little league, and if my team ends up so good that it can win the whole thing, so be it. I don't think, I'm not aiming to, it's like trying to win the lottery to go for the whole thing, and I just don't think it's a smart play. And certainly the majority of our audience is just thinking about their home league or whatever.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible Jazz Chisholm becomes a top 5 type player at this position, but the odds are against it.
He reminds me a lot of, just skill set wise, Byron Buxton. So it like we've been waiting forever for Byron Buxton. It looked like it was happening last year. So we'll see. We'll see if both Chisholm and Byron Buxton can get it done in 2022. There was another name in this group. This was your 11 through 15. And Brendan Rodgers. I mean, we got to talk about your guy, Scott, because Brendan Rodgers, how many times did we tell people to pick up Brendan Rodgers this past season? And he winds up hitting 284, 15 homers in 102 games, 798 OPS. It was solid. It wasn't overwhelming. He didn't steal any bases, but I think we're like one step closer to, if he stays healthy next year, like we get that breakout season from Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, it feels very close for a guy who had the top prospect pedigree and kind of dropped off the map because of some injuries and his first very brief stints in the majors. He just looked totally punchless. So I think if nothing else, what he accomplished in 2021 was opening people's eyes again to his upside. And, he only recently turned 25. So he's still, just right in his prime. He needs to hit for more power. I don't know that he's going to walk more. I don't think that's part of his skill set. So, that hurts his value, but I don't think we can expect more from that. I think the fact that he did so much of his damage on the road, as we talked about many times during the season, even though Coors Field should be an environment that boosts his production, I take that as a good sign. You see a Rockies hitter perform well on the road. There's the potential for big numbers because of what they could do at home, and doesn't strike out much. So, hopefully he can improve that launch angle a little bit, and then maybe we'll see a big breakout for him. And that's why I have him 15th here. 16th for what it's worth would be Ty France. And this is the range at second base where you see first base kind of pull ahead. Because Jake Cronenworth, I have him 13th here at second base, right? Versus 9th at first base. So, in that range, that kind of second tier range, second base is ahead of first base. But then you get here with Ty France 16th. I'm 16th at second base. I have him 19th at first base. So, maybe that round 10 to 15 range in drafts is where first base pulls ahead of second base. So that's why I think you could make a case that either one is stronger than the other. It just kind of depends how deep of a draft you're in.
All right. You already mentioned Ty France. He is 16th in your rankings, but the rest of that list, so 17 through 20, is DJ LeMahieu, Chris Taylor, Eduardo Escobar, and Ryan McMahon. LeMahieu he's a tough one. He's a tough one to figure out. He's a little bit older. Obviously, he got the pretty big contract last offseason and did not live up to expectations. So we'll see if he has anything left in the tank. But obviously, if he's leading off for that lineup in that stadium, like, I think there's always going to be decent upside. It's just a matter of can he get back there without the bouncy ball?
Well, he's going to be usable at least. I don't know that I'd call it upside. 2.62 head-to-head points per game. That was the same as like Luis Arias, Nick Madrigal.
He was bad, Scotty. He was bad.
Yeah. I mean, usable in a deep enough league. But if you're talking about a 12-team head-to-head lineup, you obviously don't want 2021 DJ LeMahieu to be in it.
Sure.
So, the reason I rank him ahead of a couple of those other guys I mentioned is because you're just hoping something weird was going on with him in 2021 and he bounces back with early round production again. But my hunch is that DJ LeMahieu was a victim of the deadened baseball, and we're not going to see that 2019, 2020 version again.
Who knows what kind of baseball we're going to get in 2022? I hope that there is some kind of indication of that by the time we are actually talking about our real drafts. Before we wrap up here, Scotty, just an early target. Anyone that stands out to you at the second base position that that guy, I'm gonna be interested in drafting that guy.
Other than Brendan Rodgers?
Other than Brendan Rodgers.
It really is going to depend on how things play out in drafts, because that big cluster I talked about in that second tier, like I'm happy to take whichever one of them lasts the longest. I have a hunch it'll be Max Muncy because, the bumpy finish dropped his batting average below 250. And maybe he's only like a 250, 260 hitter, but it's going to be a ton of home runs, RBI, runs scored in that Dodgers lineup. They don't take him out against lefties because he's actually even better against lefties. He's dual eligible. Unfortunately, not third base eligible anymore, but dual eligible. So I think I'm going to end up with a lot of Max Muncy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to look Jazz Chisholm in category leagues and Roto. I'm excited. I'm excited about what the guy can do. Another year in the majors. Hopefully the Marlins could do something to help out that lineup, because clearly it's not a great lineup, but yeah, power speed combination for him. I think talent is massive for Jazz Chisholm. And then Jonathan India. I really like what I saw this year. Line drive rate was massive the final 4 months of the season. I want to see what they do with the rest of the Reds lineup, but good OBP skills, can run a little bit, some power, just gives you a little bit of everything. So yeah, Jonathan India, he kind of reminds me of like Dansby Swanson at the second base position, which it's not like an elite player, but it's still very valuable. So
yeah, India. I actually think Jonathan India is better than Dansby Swanson. I say as I wear the Braves jersey here.
How dare you?
I like him even more than that. I would be fine with India as my starter. I'd be fine with like Polanco, somebody I could see myself having a lot of shares in again, just because I think people might go overboard and downgrading him.
On the other side of the spectrum, anyone that you think you might avoid?
Well, Baez is the easy answer because I'm always avoiding him. I don't see I actually see myself drafting Merrifield a lot more in points leagues than I do in Roto, for the argument I laid out. I just don't think I want to sell out that hard for stolen bases in Roto going forward. I don't want to draft somebody I don't want to elevate him so much because of stolen bases that it ends up costing me in too many of the other offensive categories, because it's just one category, and all the other categories work together in a way stolen bases don't really. Mm-hmm. And I just think I'm fine accidentally finishing 8th in stolen bases, if I build a good offense otherwise.
I'm right there with you. Those are the two names that stood out to me right away. Whit Merrifield and Javier Baez, I think, are two that I might be avoiding here in 2022. Lastly, I do want to just bring up a few prospects to know for next season, maybe next season. I don't know that all these guys are going to make it to the bigs, but they are slowly approaching Major League Baseball. Nolan Gorman with the Cardinals, 279 batting average this past year, 25 home runs. Does definitely have some legitimate power. I think we see him decently early next year. I would be surprised by that.
Mid-season. Yeah.
Nick Gonzalez for the Pirates. He was the 7th overall pick in the 2020 draft. 302 batting average, 18 homers, 7 steals this past season. The Pirates, they're a ways away. I don't know that they rush him. So
I would guess we don't see Nick Gonzalez next year, but I do have him ranked because I think there's a chance.
Okay. Xavier Edwards with the Tampa Bay Rays. This guy is like a clone of Nick Madrigal, Scotty. 302 batting average, 0 homers, 19 steals, 42 strikeouts in 79 AA games. He makes a lot of contact. He's going to run, but I'm not very excited.
I hope they would establish Vidal Brujan before they turn to Xavier Edwards, but
hopefully.
Michael
Busch with the Dodgers. He was the 31st overall pick back in 2019. 267 batting average, 20 homers, and 870 OPS at AA this past season. The problem, the Dodgers are obviously awesome. So
now this is like a Max Muncy clone.
Yeah.
Tons of on-base ability. Might have a higher batting average ceiling than Max Muncy. There were some issues this year that brought his batting average down to 267, but the scouting reports like him for average more than that. I'm really high on Michael Busch. I have him in multiple dynasty leagues. I shut everybody down who tries to trade for him. I'm really high on Busch.
All right. And the last one is Justin Foscue with the Texas Rangers. He was the 14th overall pick in 2020. And man, he looks like a good one. 275 batting average, 17 homers, a 960 OPS between rookie, high A, double A this past year. So he progressed 3 levels and he handled himself throughout. So I think that is a pretty exciting name. Don't know if I think
we'll see him next year. He's going to be like 23 next year, I think, and has already advanced to AA. So I do think Justin Foscue we'll see next year, even though he was the same draft class as Nick Gonzalez. And I'm high on him too.
Yeah, they have a few prospects coming in, Foscue and Josh Young. So maybe potentially midseason call-ups for both of those guys. Yeah, I'm trying to find his age. He's 22 years old.
Yeah, it'll be 23 before opening day next
23
year.
by March. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we will wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again on Thursday with the third base position. Bye-bye.